Welcome to Your Bossy Podcast. We are on season 4, episode 8. And for today's episode, it is titled Goodbye Forever, My Sister. It is going to be about the spirit release of my sister and her story of her car accident and how she died and how her funeral was like. The reason why it is in season 4 is because her spirit release happened when I was in Thailand. So it was a very difficult time for me, and it is something that I want to share with you within my journey when I was in Thailand. It also has a very big part into my decision making and helping me shape who I am and what I wanted in my purpose. This whole season is about Solo Thailand, Project Finding Me, where I go and try to find my purpose in life and try to work on myself, work on being in solitude and independent. So that is why we are here, and that is why everything kind of plays a part in this whole season. This episode will probably bring you through a lot of emotions. You might feel sad, scared, angry, and hopefully at the end, heartwarming. So this episode might take you on a roller coaster ride. I might be on a roller coaster ride too. So let's get into it together. I had to write key points for this episode because it's just so much, and I know that I'm just not going to be able to focus too much, so I might just be reading it off. I hope that you bear with me, and I know that I got to all of the main points that I want to share with you guys. Here is the summary of my sister Rose. Rose is my second oldest sister. She passed away on July 30th, 2021, and we had her funeral August 31st, 2021. The release of my sister's spirit was the end of November 2022 to the beginning of December 2022. I'm not sure what day, but it was around there because that was the hotel around that time that I was struggling the most. So that was when her spirit release happened. Rose was those people that were really spontaneous, outgoing, did whatever she wanted to do, didn't listen to my parents. She smoked probably at the age of 17 already, or maybe even 15. And she got married at 17, I believe, or 16 maybe even. And she had my niece and my nephew with her ex-husband. And then she has my other nephew with that guy, Tony, that I mentioned to you guys in season 2, episode 1. She dated that guy, and they were a very toxic relationship for a very long time. To her last breath, he was still present in her life. Tony is basically one of the boyfriend that she was on and off with, that abused her, that did drugs with her. Yes, my sister was a druggie. I share about how I never really saw her actually do it, but I just kind of saw the symptoms and signs of the way that she behaved and the way that she would act abnormally. So I just kind of put the pieces together that maybe she's on drugs, but I never ever saw her actually do it. I know that her boyfriend too was also a druggie. They both were in and out of jail, doing a whole bunch of stuff. It was messy, and to put it short, they weren't good people and serving the community in any kind of way, really. She left her 2 kids with my parents and I and her ex-husband, and she couldn't really take care of them because she was involved in all of these things. Her other child, which is the child with the boyfriend, she also lost custody of that nephew of mine as well, so she didn't have access to him either. That is a little summary of her. It sounds really bad, I know. She just was into all of that, and unfortunately, I don't have many memories of her too. Now I want to share with you her death and how it all happened. Her death was a car accident. It happened in Iowa. She was, I don't know if it was her or if it was Tony that was out of jail and they went out to celebrate, according to the reports, and then they were driving too fast at a turn and the car ended up flipping over. Apparently Rose was the only one, and she was the only person in the back seat as well, where she didn't have her seatbelt on and she flew out of the vehicle and she died on impact. I think it was also said that the car had crushed her and killed her. She had 2 other people in the vehicle. It was Tony as the passenger, and then it was apparently Tony's cousin, which was a female. She was also in the vehicle and she was the driver. The vehicle itself was Tony's vehicle. Apparently, she didn't see the sharp turn, and so then she couldn't stop in time to turn properly, and so then the car flipped over and killed Rose. There's just so much all around that I don't know which came first, but all of this happened. So the key points from her death day to the funeral. My parents first came to the speculation of murder, and that to make sure that it wasn't, to rule that out. I think that as a parent, you just want to make sure that your child didn't die for any other reason and that it was just a car accident. My parents were just being any parent and any loving person that just wanted to make sure. Throughout all of this, the police also came back to us and said that the cause of death was the impact in the car accident. So then we didn't proceed with hiring a private investigator or anything. From the moment that my sister passed away to us finding out and the funeral happening, it started out fine, but it got crazy. The reason for that is, of course, because of Tony. Tony is just, I've talked about him so much in season 2, episode 1, but he's just a horrible person and a manipulator and a narcissistic person. So he is just somebody that you don't want to ever meet in your life, because he will just bring you stress, depression, and trouble. When we found out that she passed away, her body was in Iowa. So we were like, we can come to Iowa so that we don't have to pay for shipping to ship her body here, and we can have the funeral there. And we could just do a ceremony for her there, since she married out of my parents' household already, because in the Hmong culture, your parents can't bury you the Hmong cultural way anymore if you marry out of the household. The reason for that is because it just brings a curse or bad energy, bad juju to the family line if you do. I don't know if it's true, I don't know, but it's just something that Hmong people and Hmong elders believe in. So they were going to go through with a Christian funeral for Rose in Iowa. All plan was good. We were going to bury her body. That's what we agreed on. We haven't talked to Tony in such a long time, but Tony was grieving and crying, and he was being like any typical person that has lost somebody. And he said, yes, I'm trying to get her the best funeral ever. We can do it in Iowa. I will find money. I will pay half of the funeral, but I will need help. And we were like, of course, we'll help. So then we ended up agreeing on that we were going to have the funeral in Iowa, and he was going to pay for certain things, and we were going to put her to rest and put her at ease. And then somewhere along this line, we received a phone call from the people at the cemetery, because they were holding her body and they were kind of the person guarding it or whatever. We received a phone call from them because, again, we've been working with everybody to make it as smooth as possible and put her to rest in peace. I don't remember his name, but we'll just call him Paul. So we received a phone call from Paul out of nowhere when we had already agreed on everything. And Paul was like, Tony said that Tony wanted to cremate the body, but I recall upon our discussion that you guys wanted to bury the body and that you guys were prepping to come here and set up a funeral date and a stone and all of that. So did you guys want to cremate the body? Because Tony is saying that you guys want to cremate the body now. And so Paul was trying to make sure that that's what we wanted. Of course, that's not what we wanted, because also in the Hmong culture, we don't believe that you should burn your body because you will not be able to rest in peace if you do that as well. So we were like, no, we did not say that we were going to burn the body. We don't know why Tony is coming up with all that. And we don't agree on that. So then, of course, we had an argument with Tony about he doesn't have the right to cremate our sister's body and we're not going to let him. And he's arguing about, oh, she told me that she wanted to cremate her body when she was alive and all of that. So then we went back and forth and argued with them and everything. This went on for a bit, and then Paul was just like, well, if you have the money to ship the body to you guys, then I can do that. But I need the money to cremate the body too. And Tony doesn't have that either. But I trust you guys and I'm not going to do anything with the body unless something is agreed upon, unless there is money present to proceed with whatever. So we were like, yes, we have the money. We want to just bury her body. We will pick up her body. And please do not let him cremate the body at all because he doesn't have the right to. He is just a boyfriend. And legally, they are not married either. So he doesn't have the right to say anything. And then we had to, of course, go through lawyers and get some legal advice from some lawyers about if he doesn't have legal right, does he have the right to the body? And they were like saying that, well, depending on the state that you live in, if you've been living together and you have utility bills or expenses that show that you guys have been living in the same property together for an X amount of time, then he can get the right to the body, but you can still take him to court and everything. So then we were like, okay, now we know. So then with all of the information, we knew that he was a druggie and that he wasn't going to be able to proceed with anything and do anything anyways. At some point in this, Tony had a lawyer or somebody that was a lawyer call my sister Mania. Mania is my oldest sister. And that lawyer was like, oh, Tony has the right to the body. And because they have been living together, if you guys want to cause trouble, then we will proceed with taking you guys to court. And we were all like, yeah, of course, we can go to court. We don't mind. We are not scared. If you want to serve us, then go ahead and serve us. And then we didn't hear anything back from them. So obviously it was some setup, some fake lawyer, some BS stuff that obviously was just to scare us. We finally got the payment and everything processed through. Tony wasn't doing his part of what Paul had asked him, so the rights came to us and we didn't end up taking it to court. We finally got my sister's Rose body to Minnesota, and then we had her funeral in August. The day of the funeral, we had a ceremony in the morning to the afternoon only. It didn't take much the Christian way, so we only had like half a day and we only had very few people. It wasn't too big or very like Hmong culture at all. Tony didn't show up to the funeral because we didn't let him show up. And because after everything he put us through, we didn't want any drama. We, of course, don't like him and we don't want him there. He got to see her body those times already. So we were like, you know, even though we feel bad to a certain extent of him not seeing her, I think that it's best for everybody if he's not present at the funeral. On the funeral day, Tony and Rose's mixed son, which is my nephew. My mixed nephew did come with his foster parents from Iowa to the funeral as well. All three of them came and they attended the funeral with the family. After the ceremony, we all headed to my parents' place. It was our first time meeting his foster parents, and it was our first time seeing him after like maybe 8 years or so. So it was a very long time already since we've seen our nephew, and so we kind of just stayed a little bit together at my parents' house. When we were there, the foster parents now, they live in Iowa, so they know a lot more details about what the daily life or what goes on, right? Because Rose and Tony were in Iowa, there's people, there's rumors, there's this and that. So we heard from the foster parents that Tony actually had another girlfriend, and that he wasn't even technically in a relationship with Rose anymore. They also said that that girlfriend was actually pregnant and that their due date was already coming up. So we didn't know any of this stuff, and this was not, we were not informed of this, because how would we get this information? We didn't even really meet up or talk to the foster parents until the day of the funeral, other than just telling them about the funeral and seeing if they could make it. That was really it. So we didn't know any information, and it's not like Tony would have told us, hey, I have a girlfriend, my girlfriend's pregnant too. He would not, of course, tell us that. So we found out that Tony had a girlfriend and they were expecting, and that she was already almost due. That really caught us by surprise, because there was just so many red flags in all of this. So that was another red flag to add to Tony's piles of red flags, as if he doesn't already have so many red flags. We also found out that Rose's condition was a lot worse than what we had thought. Like I mentioned before, how Rose was into drugs and hallucinating and acting strange. But it got beyond that, where it was like desperate for drugs now, and she did whatever she could to get her hands on it. And her hallucination was 10 times worse than what I had seen. And she wasn't even herself anymore, is basically what the foster parents had told us. That, to me, in a way, it kind of gave me a sense of relief that Rose wasn't suffering anymore, and that she wasn't starving or in the cold or being in such a bad condition. So those were all of the things that we found out about Rose and Tony and their condition, and what Tony had lied to us and everything. Now, I've mentioned about her spirit, right? And you're probably wondering, like, what spirit release? Like, you had her funeral, everything's good. Why is there a spirit release? What is this episode about? Well, in the Hmong culture, we believe in your spirit and walking your spirit to the destination, like the gates to the next life. For Rose's situation, since we did it the Christian way, we didn't have to in the Hmong term, choking to send her or anything like that. But because her cause of death was a traumatic death, there was spiritual stuff that needed to be done, because her cause of death wasn't a natural death. So her spirit was not resting well with her body, because her spirit was still alive, because her spirit was still at the car accident. So her spirit couldn't really follow her body and rest with her body. Not just that, but also because she needed assistance with that. She needed somebody to help guide her. And the Christian way just wasn't enough for her spiritually. We found out after the funeral that her spirit was still wandering around and that she didn't rest well. The reason why we know is because there was a few people with sixth senses, and maybe you don't believe in this stuff, but for those of us that do, well, there were people with sixth senses, or like some would say shamans, but some are not shamans, but they do have a sixth sense. So there were people with sixth sense that were able to see somebody around some of the family members, and they were able to describe how this spirit looked like, and that spirit was not harmful, but that spirit is just in the area and they're just wandering. And these people with the sixth sense, they were able to describe how she looked like and basically confirm that it was Rose. A few incidents happened where mysterious things happened and there was really no answer, but it was Rose protecting the family. So a lot of those things were happening. So then that's how we knew that Rose's spirit was not well rested and it was wandering. My parents were supposed to go to Iowa and just do a hupli kind of and just call her spirit to her body. Even though it's not the whole shaman, it's still just a saying or a blessing to help guide her spirit just even a little bit. But my parents never found the time to drive to Iowa to do that. So her spirit was wandering. And then during my time in Thailand, there was a shaman, and for the sake of her privacy, I'll just call her Mary. Mary, which is also one of our cousin, she came to my parents and she told my parents that Rose was begging and asking her to come to my parents and ask my parents to please have her do the ceremony to send Rose's spirit to the afterlife and to help guide her. So then that's how the ceremony of sending Rose's spirit away started. They finally found a time to get together to send Rose's spirit away. This ritual was a more modern ritual. It's not like the super old style, Hmong style, Oneng and stuff, shaman rituals or ceremonies. It's the newer version, I believe. So there wasn't any offerings or anything like that. And the shaman didn't have to like do jingle bells or anything. And if you're Hmong, you know what I'm talking about. But if you're not, maybe YouTube it or something. So they had this ceremony and it was Mary, the shaman. And then it was my sister, my Nia, my mom, and my dad. Mary was a shaman that was able to channel where she could talk to the spirits and she could talk to the living and us as well. So she was able to communicate with all parties. During this ceremony, my mom was crying and apologizing because of her guilt. And Rose was saying that it's okay and she knows that she was a bad daughter. The reason why my mom was crying and apologizing is because my mom didn't step up in her role as a mother when my sister got kicked out for behaving the way that she was. And ever since then, like, Rose didn't call my mom or Rose didn't check in or say anything to my mom. And then all of a sudden, Rose was dead. So then my mom lived in guilt of, not being able to protect her or save her or say anything. And that maybe Rose was mad at my mom. That's why Rose didn't call, or Rose was, as my mom said, that, and my mom was crying and grieving about that for a very long time. So when the ceremony happened, my mom apologized to Rose and, told her that she's sorry she couldn't step up as a mom. And, of course, Rose forgave her, and Rose said that she understands and that she's not even mad at my mom. Another thing that I was told was Rose was also crying too, and at one point, Rose was crying so much that Mary couldn't understand Rose, and Mary had to tell Rose to calm down and not cry so much because she can't understand her, and to try her best to relay her message to my mom and them without crying. Rose told my mom to stop crying so much and stop grieving so much, not just at that moment, but overall, because Rose said that every single time my mom would cry, Rose would be able to see, and she would be so sad that she couldn't comfort my mom, and she just have to, be there and just watch my mom cry. And so Rose told my mom to stop crying and to move on. The pain of a mother is just so much, even if it's not that guilt of what my mom was going through, even just losing your child. My mom was going through a lot, and Rose, of course, saw all of that, and Rose didn't want my mom to suffer anymore. Rose asked for forgiveness and apologized for not being the best daughter. She knew that she wasn't the best to my parents, and she really stepped up in asking for forgiveness and apologizing for that part of her role in my parents' life. My parents told her to start her new life and to not worry about her children. And she said that she knows that we'll keep them safe like how we've always been. My dad also asked her to make sure that she grabs her placenta in, I believe, either Laos or Thailand. I don't remember which one. But apparently she had surgery done and she had her placenta taken out and it was buried somewhere in Thailand or Laos. And she said that she already went and got it. I have to prepare myself to say this next thing because this is probably one of the hardest thing that every single time I say it or I share to talking myself through it just helps me not sob as I say it. The last thing, which I don't know if it was the last thing in the whole ceremony, but it was one of the things that happened in the ceremony. Rose actually told us that her body was already dead and she was just a corpse in the back seat before the car accident. She said that she was already drugged and that the drug that they used to drug her was some kind of drug from Mexico, and that's why there's no trace or evidence of it because you can't trace that type of drug. She said that she was murdered and that they planned it all out to drug her and cause the car accident and make it look like it was an accident. Rose told us that her time is not up yet and that her time was cut short because of the murder. And in the Hmong terms, it's where you say "Nu dan tới chi tao ta na." Well, her time wasn't up yet and her paper wasn't done yet. And so she told us all of that as well. And I remember when my sister Mania told me this and all of these moments through the phone when I was in Thailand by myself, I was just sobbing and sobbing and sobbing and crying so bad to the point where I could barely even hear my Nia telling me because the sound of my cry, I had to try so hard to hold back. I was so sad and angry and a whole bunch of mixed up emotions through all of this. But I remember when I heard this part, at one point I just stopped crying because a piece of me was just angry and it felt like I wanted justice for my sister. It just felt like everything made sense. Putting all of the pieces together of her car accident and how it happened so fast because apparently they just met up that same day. How come she was the only one that was not seatbelted and she was the only one that flew out of the car? The biggest red flag was how come Tony wanted to cremate her body all of a sudden, and when we showed him that we actually do care about Rose and that we would be there for Rose, then he went behind our back and tried to cremate her body. Him not being honest with us about his relationship with another girl and the pregnancy, all of those red flags, and this confirmation from this ceremony really confirmed it just all makes sense. And maybe to some of you guys, it's hard to believe because you don't believe in this stuff. Oh, maybe Mary, that shaman, is just trying to give you guys closure or trying to make you guys believe. But Mary didn't even know anything about the car accident. We didn't tell Mary any of the information. We didn't tell Mary any of this stuff. But Mary was the one who said all of the things that Rose was saying to her, to us. So believe what you want to believe, but I believe that this whole thing is real. And I believe that what Rose said is true because all of the red flags and everything that was kind of, it doesn't make sense. And why is he behaving? Because we've always known he was that type of person. But now it all just made sense. Mary was able to send Rose to the gates where she was finally able to rest. I don't know if she went to start her new life or if she had to finish what she had left or what really happened, but I want to believe that she's in a better place and that she'll do better things in her next life. About me personally and what I felt, I didn't know that I needed all of this from Rose. I didn't know that I needed forgiving with what she put me through, my family through, her children, and especially my parents. I didn't know that I needed to forgive her or give that attention to that area in my heart of her. I didn't feel angry or any type of resentment against her because I knew that something was wrong with her, and it was kind of like I accepted my fate and what's done is done already. But I just also didn't want a relationship with her. And I think that that is why when her funeral happened and going through this whole process, I grieved the way that I did, where it didn't seem like I was super sad to like my mom's level, is because I really lived and I really did everything without living in regret. And because, like I said, I didn't even have a relationship with Rose to that level where it continued to matter in my life. I was sad and I did cry and I did say my goodbyes to her, but I didn't have this kind of relationship still with her. When all of this happened and when hearing her apologize to my parents and just Rose showing so much humanity now, in understanding the things that she put my parents through and now doing something good for my parents, where she didn't leave my parents feeling like crap and she let my parents and them breathe, and she saved my mom from grieving in that guilt that she was in. And that to me, it meant a lot to me. I was very thankful that she was able to do that for my mom because the condition that my mom was in was really sad. And my mom was living in such guilt where even just bringing up my sister, my mom would just cry right away and my mom would just feel so bad and tears would just come down. Even if nobody even brings up anything, my mom would just think of her and my mom would just be crying, and in a way, I just knew that my mom was crying about my sister. So I'm very thankful that Rose was able to come and give that to my mom. After finding forgiveness and giving attention to this area of this whole situation or this piece in my life, I began to reflect on what I could learn from her positively. Even though we had like less than, 10 to 20 memories only together, what was the lesson that I could learn from her, and what was that relationship or the biggest thing that I could take away from her? I came to the conclusion that she was always a free spirit. And I always tell you that when I talk about her is because she really was. She did whatever she wanted to do and she didn't follow society's norm. She was a maverick. In some ways, this can be bad, but in some ways, it can be great as well. It really inspired me to chase my dreams. The fear of taking a risk didn't scare me as much anymore. I saw everything that she risked and everything that she chased and everything that she did. It was all because she didn't care about what anybody else had to say, even when it came to my parents. And for me, I am still like I love my parents, I respect them, I would not do this and that. Where she was beyond a maverick, okay? So she was way overboard. But for me, I can be who I am and I can be some of her, where I don't have to be scared to chase my dreams and have my parents hold me back from chasing my dreams. And believe it or not, that is one of the things that really led me to deciding on coming out as a CSA survivor and podcasting and chasing this dream and this passion that I am doing right now. My parents were a really big brick that stopped me from coming out publicly and from being an embarrassment or being that shameful family and putting my mom and my dad's image where they were not good parents. All of those thoughts and fears were things that I thought of constantly and that I didn't step over because I cared so much about my parents and I didn't want to disappoint them. But this lesson that I took from my sister really gave me the courage and the strength to look beyond that, where my parents' opinions and their reputation and all of that, it shouldn't stop me from chasing what I want in my life. I feel like this is the biggest lesson that she has taught me throughout our whole life together. Coming to this conclusion and this reflection, I feel way better than I felt the day of her funeral, where it felt like there was really no relationship other than now I have one less sister and that was really it. But now it was like I had a relationship with her and I took something from her and I was able to gain something from her and learn something from her. That brings us to the message of today's episode. The message of today's episode is that sometimes there are things where you realize that you never took the time to heal. If you do, it could help open your perspective and you could learn a few things from it. It could be one of the most life-changing moments for you, like how it was for me. This was something that really helped push me into deciding what I'm passionate about and what I want to pursue. So I hope that when anything comes up where you didn't know that you need forgiving and you forgive, I hope that you really reflect and see the things that you can take away from the situation. Even if you didn't have the best relationship with that person, what is something that you learned from that relationship or from that person and how they lived their life or how they were like, or just anything positive that you could just take away from them. Before I close off, I do want to share something with you, and that is that I did release my podcast in August, and that was also the same month that my sister had her funeral. It's also her birthday month as well. In a way, a piece of this is dedicated to her and the strength that she gave me as well to pursue and be a maverick just like her. I really do wish that I was there that day, the ceremony with my family and with her last goodbyes. I think that it would have been comforting to say goodbye to her and let her know that I forgive her too, and I just wish her the best in her next life. I don't really know if I should say I hope that you enjoyed this episode, because it was quite hectic and not the most uplifting episode, but I hope that you learned and took away a few things from here, and that you remember to be grateful for those around you, take care of them, and live your life where you don't regret it if anything were to happen. I hope that you have a wonderful rest of your week, and as always, stay being the bad boss that you are. Bye!